So, folks, here's the story that rumbles and rumbles, although I think it's come to its conclusion now. Kieran Shoemark has been unceremoniously dumped by John Gosden earlier today, or Johnny G, as Matt Chapman loves to call him. I believe he's announced it on Nick Luck's podcast that going forward, they're going to pick the best available jockey. They're not going to have a stable jockey anymore. Shoemark's not on the job for 5 minutes. Now he finds himself dumped. Johnny G has said, what's he said? There's no fallout, but it is the ramifications of what happened at the weekend. Now, I've done a couple of videos on Shoemark. Now, before I go any further, let me just say this. A couple have knocked me, many haven't. A couple haven't agreed with me, many have. I thought he gave the horse and 2,000 Guineas a poor ride. I was part talking from my pocket because I would have won a good few quid had the Gosden horse prevailed. I still won money, but nowhere near as much. I had 3 up out of a yank. I'd have had 4 up with the Gosden one winning. And I thought it was the best horse in the race. I've seen something in the Sporting Life yesterday. I've read something and reread it again today. And their analyst there said Fields of Gold was the best horse in the race, but it didn't win the race. I noticed on YouTube there's another couple of people doing what I've done and pouring over the ride that he gave it on Saturday. Now, I don't want to be accused of bullying. There's nothing worse than bullying, and I wouldn't entertain a bully for a moment. And I'm certainly not bullying young Shoemark. And I feel sorry for him today, I really do. I think he gave the horse a poor ride. I don't think he's good enough to be stable jockey to Gosden, and I've said that over one of the 2 videos. He's a good jockey, but not an absolute great. To be honest with you, based on the last 18 months, 2 years of Gosden stable, maybe he is good enough for that job. But when I think of Gosden at the top table with Appleby and with O'Brien. And over take the last couple of years away, over the 10 years previous, he had a real purple patch. He was winning classic after classic, Group 1 after Group 1. Always up there for top trainer at Royal Ascot. He's done really, really well. The last 18 months, 2 years, not as much. Maybe that's in part down to Shoemark even. I've not even thought of that. But when you've got the real top pilots on these horses, they just improve a pound or 2. And as I said at the weekend, I think a Buick of being on the Gosden horse at the weekend, Appleby wouldn't have won the 2,000 Guineas. I think Gosden would have done. That's my thoughts. I might be wrong. I might be proved wrong later in the season. I don't know. I said that I thought later in the season we'll find the best horse to be the Gosden horse. Now, they may not meet further on, because I think they're looking at the St James's Palace for the Gosden horse, and the other one might go up in distance. But if it doesn't and they do meet, the thing that was worrying me about the statement I made, that the Gosden horse will be better, I was thinking, well, if Shoemark's on it again, I'm always worried about the jockey on the other horse, be it a Buick or a Doyler. The fact of the matter is now, Shoemark is still going to ride for them, but he's not always going to be on the very, very best horse. So I think we'll see a better horse the next time it's ridden. On the back of that today, it was mentioned in the Nick Luck podcast, I think by Johnny G himself, that Shoemark had been dropped. I'm hoping he told Shoemark first. I'm pretty sure he would have done. That would have shown no class at all. Let me say this before I go any further with Shoemark. I don't think Gosden's handled himself brilliantly anyway in appointing Shoemark. I think Gosden should have known, look, he's gone from Franco Dettori, best in class. He's looked for something else and not found it. And I think he's pushed the button on someone that probably wasn't quite ready for the job. I've had somebody in the comment section mentioning jockeys they feel are better. I think one mentioned Callum Shepherd. I'd have Shepherd before Shoemark. Many wouldn't, but I would. But that said, Shepherd got jocked off one for the Derby last year, funnily enough, to a Gosden jockey in Haviland. Now, I'd never have Haviland over Shepherd. I think Shepherd's much better. People have mentioned Billy Lee in Ireland. As you know, I like Billy Lee. They've mentioned Chris Hayes. I like Hayes. I mentioned Colin Keane. I did a video on that. I think Colin Keane is brilliant. Many have agreed with me. A couple haven't. I think Keane's at the top table. As I said again, I was talking from my pocket. I had a bet with Betfair, Colin Keane to be next stable jockey with Gosden, and it went down, sadly. And now, as it turns out, I see at the weekend now, they've on the racing show today, ITV Racing today, they've interviewed Thady, Johnny Gosden's son. I don't think he wanted to be there. I don't think he wanted to answer questions, especially when Chapman was throwing at him the big winners that Shoemark's had over the last 18 months. There weren't many of them, but he threw about 5 at him. And he said, look, the decision's been made, but he's still going to ride for us. He's here today. And he's riding in the Musidora next week at York. And I thought, well, that's all well and good. But is he going to be on the real big races? To that end, I notice, what have we got here? Colin Keane. I wrote it down and I can't find it. What on earth have I done? Bear with me. Yeah, Colin Keane is on Detain for their stable in the French 2,000 guineas at the weekend. And in the French 1,000 guineas, you've got Sumion riding Zanzoon. Did Zanzoon win the trial the other week? I think it did. That accompanied the Craven, or at the Craven meets. I'm pretty sure it did. I might be wrong on that score, to be honest with you. But anyway, Sumion's on Zanzoon in the 1,000. Keane is on Detain in the 2,000. So, Shoemark's got near neither of those. And I thought to myself, he's not handled it that well, but when they interviewed Gosden after the race, the 2,000 guineas, he looked a bit put out. He looked a bit shell-shocked. He looked also like he didn't want to be spoken to by Chapman. He said on a couple of occasions, we just ran out of grass. We didn't get there in time. We did come from a little far back. It could have been ridden more prominently. And I thought, well, he's not really backing his jockey here. And he does have a bit of an habit of doing that. But that said, as I said over the last couple of messages, this is multi-million. This is multi-million, this at the top end. And you've got to get it right. And I just don't think Shoemark is the man for that job. And I think he proved it on Saturday. I think now, 3 or 4 days later, I told you that, Johnny G's thinking the same. So probably he's listened to Grumpy's video. No, I know he's not, but he may have done. Anyway, he's pushed the button. Shoemark is gone. And it's the best rider going forward. As I say, don't want to be doing an hatchet job on Shoemark. He seems a nice fella, he really does. There was a lot of sympathy for him today on ITV Racing. You could see that. And I feel sorry for the fella. But when they're riding out the top table, they've got to be better. And when people like myself have got money on, we expect better. We used to Dettori on Gosden mounts. Going from Dettori to Shoemark, it's too much of a step. Just too much. Had it been a Buick or something like that, I'd have had no problem. I just think Buick is the better rider. And I think he showed that in the 2,000 guineas. That's just my opinion.